The next menu item in EDIS, other than the data tab, it's the assessments tab. So this goes from the component of, sometimes in EDIS, you want to read data that comes from other systems, but sometimes in EDIS, you want to create your own data and not necessarily connect to other underlying systems. And that's why the assessments tab exists. Now, the assessments tab, it's split it into two main subcomponents. One is the custom assessments. Two is the testing engine. Now, custom assessments comes out of the box with the standard version of EDIS, and it gives you a quick way for the users to enter assessment scores without having to connect to an underlying data source. Any user, a teacher, an administrator, right, can create a custom assessment and can input scores and can visualize those scores in EDIS and can also use those scores to measure progress towards interventions, all of that. So that's the custom assessments. Now, the testing engine is a separate product. It's an add-on module on top of EDIS. So some customers don't have the testing engine. Some customers do have it, right? So, but it's an option. If you turn on the testing engine option, then your menu will have both custom assessments and also the testing engine. Now, the testing engine, it's a full cycle testing platform, meaning that as a user, you can create your own questions. So there's a question bank, right? Now, you can also integrate with very popular question banks out there in the country, as long as certain standards for the testing for the item banks are met. You can integrate those automatically into EDIS and pre-populate the testing engine with many questions already. In the testing engine, you can also build test blueprints, and we're going to deep dive on that later on. But the testing blueprint is just a matrix that tells you, for example, a test is going to have 50 questions, and then I want question number 1 to address these specific standard. I want question number 2 to address this other standard, and then EDIS will build a test based on the criteria of that testing blueprint. Then in EDIS, you can have a test bank. So similar to how you have an item bank with tons of questions, you can put all those questions together as a test, and then that becomes part of the test bank. And then once you have a test in the test bank, you can create what is called a test event, which comes next after the test bank. So the test bank is basically the structure of a test. Multiple questions, right? There's certain parameters on how the test should be taken, but a student cannot take a test directly from the test bank. A test event needs to be created, and a test event is going to have a date. It's going to have certain parameters. For example, when you build a test event, you can say, I want my students to use a calculator. I don't want them to use a calculator, right? So there's certain parameters that you can set up when you're building a test event. And after a test event exists, you can assign students to that test event. And that's what allows the student to take the test. So that is the testing engine. So let me just go a little bit more into the custom assessment. I'm not going to go full depth, but I just want to cover a few items, right? So custom assessments, right? Just to recap, it comes included in the standard version of EDIS, and it gives the user the ability of building an assessment, right? And then collecting scores. So for example, the first thing is the custom assessments bank. So the custom assessments bank, every time a user creates a custom assessment, it becomes part of that custom assessment bank, right? So for example, in here, I can see, for example, this read rater assessment in here, right? And if I click on it, right, it takes me to the landing page for that custom assessment. And I can see, for example, overall progress of the students towards that assessment. So When you build a custom assessment in EDIS, a custom assessment has the concept of a custom assessment trial. So what does it mean? When you build a custom assessment, you can say, this is an assessment, and it's going to happen throughout the year, and I'm going to have one trial every month. And that means you're going to get 12 trials for the year that are part of that assessment, right? You can have a custom assessment that only has one trial if you want, right? But just as a rule of thumb, when you're entering scores into a custom assessment, you don't enter scores directly in the custom assessment. You enter it in a trial. So worst case scenario, you're going to have a custom assessment that only has one trial. If it's just one thing that happens only once in a lifetime and it doesn't have to happen again, it's a custom assessment with one trial. But some of our districts have custom assessments with, let's say, 50 trials if you're doing one trial per week. Some districts have 250 trials if you're going to do one trial per day, right? Which is more aggressive. It's your choice. You're in full control. We're going to do a deep dive on how to create a custom assessment, how to assign trials and all of that. But just know that, you know, when you have custom assessments, users can enter data. They can visualize progress. So for example, this is the overall progress. And I know that this is a custom assessment that only has 3 trials, right? And trial number 1, 62% of the scores met the expectations, 71 and 79 in the other one, right? Then you can also click on so this is proficiency versus mastery, right? So each custom assessment is going to have a mastery score overall for the custom assessment, but then each trial can have its own target score. So you can decide to measure whether you want, you know, proficiency versus a target, proficiency versus a mastery. You can also click on the average score, and EDIS will calculate the average score for each trial as it has been taking on the assessment, right? 612, 637, 660. And if you see here, you have 3 different lines. They're all the same in here, because you can also go in here and click on the filter and say, you know what, I would like to compare the results of a specific school versus all the students that have taken the assessment. So when I click here on the progress, you should see different lines. So if you're a teacher and you're looking at the progress of the custom assessment, you can say, how is my current filter compared to all the students that I work with, compared to all the students in the district that have taken the test? So it should create 3 lines for you. So if you're in a classroom, right, and you're working with 20 kids, and there's a specific group of, let's say, 10 kids that you're following closely, you can go into your filter, go under, let's say, groups, right? Select the name of the group that you're working with. So let's say this group gives you 10 students out of the 20, and then that's going to build 3 lines in the chart. The 10 students that you're working with, which is the current filter, your 20 students that are assigned to you by EDIS in the system, so your entire class, and then let's say 1,000 students that took the entire assessment in all the classes in the district, right? So it should give you a good, you know, 3-tier comparison, right? And that applies to all the different scores, right? If you want to see specific scores of the students, you click on the scores tab and it will show you, hey, this is what each student got, right, in each one of the administrations, right? If it's green, it means the trial met the target. If it's red, it means it did not meet the target, right? And then if you start going down, you can go into each specific trial. So for example, if I go in here under the fall of 2022, then EDIS, it's going to build a Bell's curve. So it's going to tell me, you know, this is how many students were in the bottom 10%, bottom 10, right, until like top 10%, right? And it will, and as you filter, it's if you see that your curve, it's moved a little bit towards the right, that means you're doing better, right, overall than the rest of the district. And you can do this, you know, fall, winter, spring, right, on each specific trial. So custom assessments, right? Everybody can enter scores into the custom assessments. It's very easy. you can go here on the options and say, you know what, I would like to enter scores. And then EDIS builds a little matrix for you with the input boxes, right? And allows you to enter scores. Another thing is that it doesn't let you enter information that is invalid. So for example, if you say in EDIS, my scores go from 200 to 1,000, you cannot enter 199. You cannot enter 1001. You can also not enter a letter if it's expecting a number. So when you design your custom assessment, you can create the scale. You can say this is a number. It's going to go from here to here, right? And then that means no errors are going to be made by the users, right? There's another option when you're looking at custom assessments, and it's that you can you can view the scores, right? And it's going to tell you, hey, these are the scores for the fall. These are the scores for the winter, right? You can switch between the different trials, and it's going to tell you how each student did. Now, that is custom assessments. You can also look at custom assessments as part of the student profile. So every time a score it's entered in the custom assessments, it will also be visible in the student profile. So if you're just looking at one student, you will see the result in there. You will go under academics, right? And there should be a section in there that's called custom assessments. You click on custom assessments, right? You can probably, let me see here, English, math, let me see, there you go, under reading, right? You should see that assessment that we were just working on. You click on it, right? And it's going to tell you how Margaret did versus the target, versus the filter, versus all the students that the teacher can see, versus the grade level, and versus the entire district. So it will really give you a good comparison on how the student did versus the peers. And then you can go in here and go into every specific trial of that assessment, right? And you can see the student versus the other kids. So just know that, again, the overall subject of EDIS is data productivity, right? Any work that you do when you enter scores in the custom assessments application will also reflect in the profile of the student, right? And you'll be able to see those results, and those are immediate, right? You don't have to wait for a data sync or anything. This is just happening immediately as part of the student profile. You can also use custom assessments as a data source to progress monitor an intervention. That's going to be a little bit more advanced. We're going to touch on that in the future, but just know that all the scores that you're recording in there, they can also connect to an EDIS intervention, and they can keep track of the progress of the student towards the intervention, right? So that is the custom assessments bank. Later on in another tutorial, we're going to touch on creating a custom assessment, entering scores, and all of that, right? But just know that you can create unlimited custom assessments, right? And you can monitor them in EDIS. They will stay in EDIS historically forever, and they will become part of the student profile until eternity, right? And then you will be able to use them for interventions if you're progress monitoring interventions. So that is the custom assessments. Now, the testing engine, which is an add-on into EDIS, like what I said before, full cycle testing platform. So whenever we say in K-12 education, full cycle testing platform, what I mean by this is I mean that you can do questions, you can do test blueprints, you can do tests, you can do test events, and then there's an interface for the student to take the test online. In the case of EDIS, there's another option as well to upload scores from written tests. So, like the standard bubble sheet, like if a teacher hands you a piece of paper with a bubble sheet, for example, here, you can go into a testing engine, and EDIS can actually print like a generic answer sheet, right? And then you can print this for your entire class. If you do a test event and you say, for example, this test event, it's intended for 20 students, there's an option that you can print this answer sheet for the 20 students in your class, and then EDIS will pre-fill the student name, the test event name, the numbers in here, right? And it's all ready to be answered. Once this is answered, EDIS has an interface that you can say upload scores, and then you upload those sheets after you scan them, and then EDIS will build the scanning, will automatically go in there and automatically score the test for you based on the responses of these. But just know that this is not required, right? Like a lot of our students can take the test in EDIS. So just to summarize, right, in a testing engine, you have your item bank where you can build multiple questions. You have your blueprints, which is the criteria of a test, and EDIS will automatically generate tests based on the blueprint. You have the bank of all the tests that have been generated by EDIS, and you can build your own test and manually input questions into that test. You can build a test event, which is when you assign a test to a student. And there's options for either creating answer sheets with bubble sheets, uploading and auto scanning and auto grading of your assessment. And then there's an interface for the student to take the test online. So for example, if I log out here in EDIS, you can see that there's an online test tab in here. If I click on it, I just have to enter the test code, the student ID, and then I can access the test. And we're going to do a deep dive on how that testing interface works, but just know that this is what the testing platform does. So that's it for now. Let me just do like one final recap just to make sure that we covered everything, right? So the assessments tab, right? This is built for EDIS to manually input data without having to connect to other systems. There's two options in the assessments tab: custom assessments and testing engine. Custom assessment, the users manually input scores. Testing engine, the students can take a test, and then the scores are automatically inserted into EDIS. Custom assessments comes standard with the base version of EDIS. Testing engine, it's an application that is an add-on into the EDIS license. So that's it for now.